Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest is New York Times best-selling author of 17 books and several short stories for children, including her most recent Mermaids and Pirate. Welcome, Tracey Baptiste.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Richards. Thanks so much for having me.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with us what it feels like to be a New York Times best-selling author? That is amazing.
Sure. So I was born in Trinidad and Tobago, and I had so many books and so many people telling me stories when I was a little kid that I knew I wanted to be a writer really early in my life. And I was very much encouraged by that as a kid growing up in Trinidad. Trinidad happens to be someplace that's very literary. There are a lot of writers that have come out of Trinidad. And when I moved to the United States when I was 15 years old, I came across another Trinidadian writer. Her name is Rosa Gee, and she wrote this book called The Friends. And that so mirrored my experience moving from Trinidad to New York, that I decided I wanted to write for kids then, because I wanted them to have the same kind of experience and the same kind of connection with a book that I had with this particular book. And so that's really when I started trying to write for children. And my first book came out in 2005. And I have been writing and publishing ever since. My first book to hit the New York Times bestseller list was a fantasy set in the Minecraft world. It was called Minecraft the Crash. But probably my most popular books have been the Jumbies series, which is a series of books that centers Caribbean folklore. And that's actually what directly led to this new book, Mermaid and Pirate, because in that series, the Jumbies, I had mermaids and this creature called Mama Jlo, who is half beautiful woman, half anaconda. And she comes from a combination of Caribbean and West African folklore. And when the whole thing with Disney and the Little Mermaid and the casting of Halle Bailey as Black Ariel started, all of the discussion, my editor asked me if I would write a Black mermaid story. And that is how Mermaid and Pirate came to be, was because of my background and my interest in fantasy creatures. And and next thing you know, Mermaid and Pirate.
And I have to tell you, the illustrations are off the chart. I'm looking at the book. I have the book. Thank you so much. So those that are watching can see the book is absolutely fabulous, and just the quality of it. Talk about the creation of writing.
Sure. So the idea with me, the way that I approach stories is I usually have just one tiny idea to start with, and then I just start expanding on that. So when I was writing Mermaid and Pirate, of course, my editor asked me for a Black mermaid story, but that is not enough to build a story on. I needed to have, something else that I could think about as I was thinking about this particular mermaid. And one of the first things I thought about actually was what happens with a Black woman when her hair is in the sea. And I've had plenty of experience with this as a kid growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, because every weekend we went on the beach and my mom had to deal with my hair every weekend after I went swimming. So this was the first idea I had. So when I started Mermaid and Pirate, the thing that I thought about was what happens if, like she gets caught in the nets, and then she's got to deal with her hair. And what does that look like? So here's poor mermaid caught in the nets. And the first thing that Pirate has to do is try to help her out. And especially dealing with her messy hair that is caught up in all of the knots. And from there, it just was, smooth sailing as far as, well, smooth sailing for me, not smooth sailing for Mermaid and Pirate, because they got into plenty of trouble. But it was just getting them into like one little problem after another, after another. And I was just building on this idea of this very first little problem of Mermaid and Pirate getting into being sort of washed together by the storm, and Mermaid getting caught in his nets and having to extricate herself because her hair is all tangled.
So, talk to someone in the audience and they would like to be a writer, an author. What advice would you give them?
Well, one of the first things that I tell everyone, I teach writing. I teach at Lesley University in a low residency MFA program, and I talk to kids about writing really all over the world. And I would say, you need to be a reader. You really need to read a lot, and you need to read widely, because you're never going to know, where inspiration comes from, or B, you're going to learn a lot of things by reading a lot of different kinds of writing, seeing how different writers approach subjects, even if it is nonfiction. So it could be fiction, it could be nonfiction. You're still going to learn a lot. You're going to absorb a lot just by being a reader. And then the next thing you have to do is you have to write. You got to practice it, right? So you've got to get some writing in as often as you can. Now, there's some people who say you have to write every day. I am not a real believer in that, because people's lives are busy and people have a lot of things going on. And, I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they miss a day or two of writing, because I certainly skip days of writing for sure, and still am able to do all of the things that I do. So you get into the habit of writing, though, as often as you can, and you get in that practice. And then after that, you do a lot of reading, you're practicing your writing. At some point, you're going to need feedback on that. And that means somebody else who is not listening to the story all the time, like not the person you're like maybe using as a sounding board for your story, somebody else entirely who hasn't heard you talk about the story. Let them get their eyeballs on it and see what they think about it. And it's not so much what they say and what their feedback is, but try to gauge how they feel about it in different parts, because that will really tell you what parts are working and what parts are not working. When people have their emotions caught up in the story, those are the parts where the story is working. And if they're like sort of, not really feeling one way or the other about a certain part, that's probably where the story is not working. So really pay attention to how people feel about the story and not so much what they say about the story.
Did you self-publish any of your stories?
No, all of my stories have been through traditional publishers. So my very first novel came out in 2005. That one was called Angel's Grace, and that one came out through Simon and Schuster. And I've had several other books since then. I've worked with a number of different publishing houses, and Mermaid and Pirate is through Algonquin Young Readers, which is a division of Workman and Hachette.
Would you recommend someone go through a publishing house or self-publish?
Well, for me, having a publisher do all of the work of putting the book together is a real advantage, because that is not work that I know how to do. The thing is, when you have a book that's like this, you need an illustrator. I was not the person who chose the illustrator for Mermaid and Pirate. The publisher did that. The illustrations are really gorgeous. Like, you look at the book, these are high quality illustrations. Being able to, have illustrations like this really requires somebody who understands what they're doing, somebody who knows how to manipulate the files to get the best layout for each of the pages, because the illustrations and the text for the story are two separate things and they need to figure out how to put those things together, then having the book go to a printer who like really knows what they're doing with this and being able to get the best colors out of those files and things like that. These are not things that I am familiar with as an author. So having a publisher do those things for me is a huge advantage because it means that I really can just focus on the writing of books and not the publishing of books, the marketing of books, the printing of books, the selling of books. I don't have to worry about those things. But there are a lot of people who do really well self-publishing because they're okay with taking on all of these other roles. And if you are a person who's okay taking on all of those other roles, then yeah, I mean, definitely go for it. It's just not something that works for me personally. I really like being able to partner with a publisher who handles all of those other things for me.
Tracey, you're very seasoned author. How long does it take you to write a children's book?
It kind of depends. So my very first novel, Angel's Grace, I wrote that in maybe about 6 months or so. But my second novel, The Jumbies, took me 9 years to figure out. I started working on it. I put it away for a long time. I came back to it. I put it away. I came back to it. So it took me 9 years to figure out how to write that book. But then the next book in the series only took 9 months. The one after that took 4 months. There are some picture books I have worked on for 3 or 4 years before I got it right. And then some picture books that I wrote in like maybe 2 nights. It really kind of depends. Some stories just kind of come and you can see what it is almost immediately, kind of like a kind of train kind of hitting you. And some stories just take a lot of work and take a lot of time. Mermaid and Pirate was something that I worked several months on before I felt like I had a really good idea of what this story was going to be. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on the book. Different books will take you different amounts of time for sure.
So you've been doing this a while. What has changed in the industry and in regards to someone finding a publishing house?
So one of the things that has changed from my very first book being published in 2005 to now is that there's a lot more information out there about publishing, and there are a lot more people publishing, especially people publishing in children's literature. So a lot more people writing picture books, chapter books, young adult novels. So the market is busy and crowded, but the writing has gotten steadily better. So the kind of writing that's being published now is just so excellent. And it just has been growing in that way. The other thing that I've noticed with publishing is that there is a lot more opportunity for writers of color now than there used to be. It used to be that you might see one or two writers of color on a list for a publishing house, like per season. And now there are way, way more writers of color because people are coming to realize that there are so many more stories that have not been told. There are all of these cultures that have all of these stories that they want to be able to bring to all readers. So there's a lot more opportunity, I think, now for writers of color to be traditionally published, but you're also competing with writers who are doing just amazing, amazing work. So you really have to be excellent when you are trying to come into the industry and put out a book.
What is something that we don't know about being an author that we should know?
Um, Let me think. What is something that you should know? I think that, especially for children's book writing, I think a lot of people think that it is easy to write for kids, especially when you think about a book like that, like a picture book, right? You think that it is, you know, 200 to 500 words. You think it's simple, it's easy because it's short. But what I've learned is that the younger you write for, the younger age group you write for, the harder the writing becomes. Because with books for older kids and for adults, you have a lot more knowledge in the reader that you can hang things on. The reader is bringing a lot to that book that they know, so that you don't have to, as the writer, do a lot of that scaffolding so that they can understand certain things. So you can write a story with a certain level of expectation that the reader is going to bring to it. But as you write for younger and younger people, you are writing for somebody who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience in the world. So you are bringing new ideas to them, and you have to approach those ideas in a way that you're teaching them about these concepts as you are telling a story. So as the writer, you have to do way more work, but you also have way less language to be able to do it in. So your words have to be vivid and precise. And writing for young kids, writing picture books is really no easy feat. It really requires a level of skill that a lot of people don't realize. It is far easier to write a novel than it is to write a picture book, because all of the feeling and nuance that you get in a novel, where you have, 50,000 words to get to all of that, you only have 500 words to be able to do it in a picture book. So writing a picture book, super, super difficult.
Tracey, what is the biggest takeaway that you want our audience to leave with for this interview?
So one thing is for sure that I hope you guys pick up Mermaid and Pirate because it's super cute. And I really want to encourage people, if they want to write, to just go out there and do it. Like, read a lot, write a lot. And especially if you want to write for little kids, you want to write books like this, you kind of have to read books like this to be able to write for little guys. So I hope that you guys pick up Mermaid and Pirate. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy all of the language that I use in there to get your little ones to talk like a pirate and talk like a mermaid and have a good time. And I hope it's a fun time for everybody.
So tell us, how can we pick up the book?
Sure. So Mermaid and Pirate is available in bookstores everywhere right now. You can also pick it up online at wherever your favorite online retailer is. And you can also go to my website, which is traceybatiste.com, to find out about Mermaid and Pirate and all of my other books. That's TRACEYBAPTISTE.com.
And what is the age of that specific book? Who's the reader?
So Mermaid and Pirate really is for the youngest readers. So this is a read aloud for really tiny people. It is for 0 through 99 because it is written for kids who don't read yet, so that they can look at the pictures and enjoy the pictures by Liesl Adams, and for parents to enjoy as they are reading aloud. And it's also for kids who are a little bit older and can read by themselves, to sit down and flip through this book and read it to themselves in their bed and dream of a mermaid world and being out in the ocean.
So share with us, who are your top two influencers and or mentors, and what lessons do they teach you?
So there are a couple of people who I look up to very much. One of them is my editor, well, my former editor, Elise Howard. She retired recently, and so she is somebody who very much influenced my writing career and how I write and the kinds of things that I write and the topics that I write. She was somebody who pushed me to write things that I had not even considered writing before. So Mermaid and Pirate, for example, was really her pushing me to write a Black Mermaid story. So this is somebody who is for sure a mentor of mine. The other person is my mom, who was, my eternal cheerleader when I was a really little girl and I said that I wanted to be a writer. She was like, "Yeah, you do that." And she did absolutely everything in her power my entire life to make sure that I had all of the tools that I could have to make this dream of mine come true. She reads all of my books, she encourages, she criticizes, she, has comments. She is forever in my corner. She is somebody that I look up to for sure.
Talk about that first aha moment when you were graced the title of New York Times bestseller author.
I was very surprised and pleased when I found out that Minecraft the Crash had hit the New York Times bestseller list. That is a dream for authors to be able to hit the New York Times bestseller list. And it was particularly sweet for me in that moment because this was a book that I had worked on with my son. I am not a Minecraft gamer, and he is. And when I started working on this book, he was 10 years old. And I actually didn't want to do the book at all because I am not a Minecraft player. But he promised that he would help me with the book. He said, "I will teach you how to play the game. I will answer your questions." And he did. And he did such a great job with that that the Mojang people actually named him as a consultant on the book. So on the page with all of the ISBN number and the Library of Congress information and whatnot, very bottom, it says consultant Adam Batiste because I could not have done it without him. So it had double special meaning for me when I found out that it had hit the list because it is for sure a career highlight to hit the New York Times bestseller list, but also that I did it because of this book that I had worked on with my child was really super special. Meanwhile, when I told him that we had hit the New York Times bestseller list, he did not care, not even one little bit. Like he was not impressed by this at all. So that was really funny. And also kind of reminds me that like the things that are important to me, not necessarily important to everybody else. So it was one of those moments where I was able to enjoy it, but also get perspective in that same moment. I was able to get a little perspective of, yes, that's nice, but it's not the only thing.
Thank you for sharing that. Tracey, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
Sure. I think, let's see. Who, that's a good question. That's a hard thing. I think so I'd ask why Black mermaids? Why write a story that specifically centers Black mermaids? And the reason that I did that is because for me, growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, in a country of Black and brown people and spending all of my weekends on the beach, swimming in the ocean, it seemed kind of obvious to me that fantasy creatures, including mermaids, would look like all of the people around me, like these Black and brown people. But when the casting happened for Disney's The Little Mermaid and Halle Bailey was cast in the role of Ariel, and people were so surprised by this, and we're having all of these conversations about how mermaids can't be Black. I was so surprised that people thought this way because it was so unlike my own personal experience. But I quickly realized that, a lot of people have only been exposed to white mermaids because those are the stories that we have had in popular culture for years and years and years. So I wrote this op-ed for the New York Times called Mermaids Have Always Been Black, which really is about the fact that there are mermaid stories coming from all over the world. And there have been these stories for centuries, long before Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Little Mermaid. There were cave paintings in South Africa of Black mermaids in a place called Karoo. There are stories about ancient mermaids in Persia. The Maori people of New Zealand have ancient stories about mermaids. There is an old folklore in Brazil about a brown mermaid. So I really wanted to introduce to people the idea that there are mermaids from literally every culture around the globe, and not all of those cultures, obviously, are white. So that is really why I wanted to write this particular story with a Black mermaid, to just kind of expand the idea of what mermaids can be, and really to let people know that mermaids can look like any person from any culture, from any part of the world.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
Yeah, ready.
Your ideal car?
Lexus.
Your favorite comfort food?
Croissants.
You relax doing what?
Watching TV, especially reruns of Star Trek.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
Ooh, Beyonce.
Your favorite dance song?
My favorite dance song is actually Bruno Mars. And of course, I'm blanking on the song right now. Oh my gosh, but it is a Bruno Mars song. Why can't I think of the song right now? But it is a Bruno Mars song.
Work out or hit the couch?
Workout.
Tracey Baptiste, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and do business with you and to purchase your books. And feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Sure. Thank you again for having me, Dr. Richard. So you can find me on my website. That is traceybaptiste.com, TraceYBaptiste.com. Mermaid and Pirate is out right now. You can buy it anywhere you get books, including online. And you can find me on Twitter at Tracey Baptiste, on Spoutable at Tracey Baptiste, on Instagram at Tracey Baptiste Writes.
Thank you, Tracey. That's a wrap.
Thank you.